Hello, everyone. We're back again today with another episode of the Clektive Thinking podcast. And it'll come as no surprise to anyone who's been listening to the series so far that I'm joined by Clekt's resident solutions architect, Elliott Fairhall. Today's episode, we're actually going to go down a bit of a different route, if you don't mind me asking so. So today we're going to be a little bit different. Rather than spotlighting necessarily the kind of technology around data and AI that we're seeing released through the likes of Snowflake and others, what we're actually going to do is have a slightly provocative conversation around why might an organization's AI project be failing on a more kind of, practical sense of that question. And what we're really kind of focusing on here is the trends, the kind of processes, and maybe finishing up with some kind of steps or guidance on how someone listening might be able to take an AI aspiration or something they want to look into and actually get that through to a live AI project that's delivering kind of value for their business or their organization. Now, the reason specifically that I've wanted to bring this up today is because there was a report released by MIT, and it led with quite a shocking statistic, actually, that in 2025, 80% of businesses attempted to implement an AI project, but only 5% of those actually made it into production and driving value for those organizations, which is a pretty shocking kind of conversion rate. And, with Clekt being an AI consultancy, what I wanted to do is kind of deep dive into that a little bit further and see if we can unpack around why that might be the case and what can ultimately be done to improve that conversion rate and get more of those AI aspirations into production and delivering value for businesses. So let's start there. I know it's quite broad, Elliott, but if I were to ask you based on your kind of experience, is quite broad. But if we're seeing this trend of so many organizations attempting to deliver AI, but ultimately not being successful in doing so, why do you think that's the case based on what you're seeing in the market?
Okay. So I think if we think about that report, so that report was like later part of last year. So absolutely makes a lot of sense at the time, and people would have been working on projects way earlier than that. So again, you're talking into sort of 23, 24, if not earlier, right? But the thing we've got to think about, and the thing that I really took some key takeaways I got from that sort of report, you could say, is around AI is evolving. Okay. It's really important that we test, that we understand that we're going to fail at some things and that there's going to be a real requirement for sort of experimentation. And that's not a bad thing. But we also need to really consider, what are we piloting and how we're piloting to set up for success. So it's about understanding what is it that you want to do with AI? What value is that going to bring to your business? What outcomes are you looking to achieve with AI? And then really bring that into the fold in terms of what you're looking to achieve as part of a proof of concept. And keeping it that for a start. Keep it as a proof of concept. That report, I think, was quoting things like, Gen AI pilots don't deliver any business value. Well, that's disingenuous, because that's why you need to have that conversation first. It's not just about AI for AI's sake. It's about what is it that you want to achieve? What's the outcome? What are the values that the value you're going to get from that? And then choosing the right technology, the right process, the right partner, or the skills you have maybe internally to do it. Because the point here, and why I'm sort of alluding to it, is that AI sometimes gets it wrong. But in the same way, there'll be people, in the business, that whole sort of shadow AI thing, that will have got it on their mobile phones, they will have it on their work laptops, or they will have, exposure through various services now with AI. So there'll be a confidence to use AI. There may be parts of the business that are using AI or services that are available to them that can use AI. And if the business hasn't got AI, they could be just doing it a bit under the table. So that's why it's really clear to have clear, concise projects to be able to work that way and be able to really deliver the value that you're looking for.
You've raised some good points there. And the one I want to pick on specifically is I've been hearing more and more about this kind of concept of what you call their shadow AI or shadow IT, where employees are, you're absolutely right, with the availability of tools like Perplexity, ChatGPT, there will be people out there using these tools, but not necessarily in a kind of governed or controlled way. And how do you think, Elliott, organizations can almost have those guardrails to be able to enable their employees to use AI, but do so in that kind of controlled manner?
I think if you're a business and you're using AI, that you haven't really got a policy, you haven't really got any sort of standards, or you're aware that people are using it but not really controlling it. I think it's time to sort of set the sort of declaration. What is it that as a business are we prepared to accept? Are we saying that AI is an okay thing to do? Is it not an okay thing to do? That's really important to make clear, like sooner rather than later. If you don't have one, you probably need one. And if you've got a culture that really have, got it on their phones, possibly looking to use it, or you've got appetite to use it, then it's looking at the right technology again. What's the outcome?
Yeah.
Don't just have AI for AI's sake. But in the same way, what you want to try and do is if people are using it or people have a desire to use it, it's about planning those outcomes to make it bring efficiency to your business. Because it can also go two ways. You can have people that are really excited about AI. You can have people that are really scared about it. So it's really clear to choose what your declaration is and how you operate. And again, that's going to be dependent if you're a regulated industry. There's going to be lots and lots of sort of considerations and factors that need to play into that. But again, that's why it's so important in terms of working out and going down that path. Don't just sort of ignore the path, if that makes sense. I think as well, it's really important, especially with the shadow IT thing, and especially around, how people are working in a governed way. I think it's really important that people have the skills, and I think it's really important that people are given the opportunity to experiment with AI. So although the report will say things around, things aren't getting into production, it's great to give someone something to experiment, but not without a clear boundary line or a set of what you're looking to achieve. Otherwise, you're never going to get there. And the whole point here is you want to bring people along the journey with IT, and you want to bring people along the journey with AI, because the idea here is you want your business to be able to be competitive, grow with the trends, and AI is not going anywhere, right? So it's better to work out a plan as to how you're going to work or operate in this new world, you could say. I don't like saying that, but that is what it is, really.
Yeah. No, makes sense. And what I like there is throughout those answers, it's always tying back to the people, isn't it? And it's really focusing in on, although the AI and the technology to facilitate that is largely what's driving the value, it all ties back to the people and making sure they're bought into that. And as you rightly point out, kind of being brought along that journey with the organization. So no, that's really key. Just on that point, let's take a theoretical example, if we may. Let's say if Clekt were to be looking into a POC for an AI project, perhaps for marketing or for finance, for example. How do we go about bringing people on that journey, so to speak? And what are the kind of ways that we make sure that people are bought into any AI projects or POCs that we might be looking to, build out and develop?
The whole point of bringing people on the journey is that change management, right?
Yeah.
But there's that, but there's also this other sort of more intrinsic benefit that you get from working with others in this sort of process. So if we were going to do, let's say, a marketing proof of concept, the first instance we want to do is we want to understand what is it we want to achieve. What is it that this process, solution, generation, whatever that's going to be, what's the outcomes? What are we hoping to achieve with it? How is it going to move the dial? Can we attribute it to a cost line? Can we attribute it to a saving in some way, shape, or form? Possibly. But the point is that with this marketing example, you need the marketing team, because although as a technologist, you might go, I know exactly where the data's stored. I know exactly what we need to do. I understand there's lots of people doing it out there. Don't know what your marketing team are doing. So it's understanding, okay, what makes up the brand voice? what makes up the marketing standards, what ensures that what you're producing is consistent and repeatable. There'll be key individuals that will be able to support with the process of enabling or teaching or developing that proof of concept so it is right. So again, setting up for success, because as I said earlier, testing, defining, validating, all really important steps. Because what you don't want to do is you want to be able to ensure that the marketing team are able and involved so they trust it as well, because it's all about assisting to support business outcomes, not necessarily AIs for AI's sake. And that's the key thing. So hopefully, I think that might have answered the question for like marketing.
Yeah.
But with finance, that's obviously, a bit more different. Again, the standards are really important. The standard operating procedures are really important. Getting finance involved, because you'll want to reconcile. You want to be able to ensure that it does this in a consistent way. You want to ensure that actually it has all the information it needs. So having your data organized, probably really important here as well. But again, it's about that tangible outcome at the end.
Are there any other final points or any, bits of guidance that you might be able to give anyone that's listening who maybe is keen to implement an AI project, or they have a POC or proof of value in mind? Is there anything that you would give as kind of final bits of advice to how they can make that AI project or POC a successful one?
Sure. So the industry, and you've got sort of chatbots, you've got LLMs where you can have chats and conversations, and that's evolving into, you can have agents that now do parts or all parts of a process, for example. Each of these types of solution, you could say, or offering by the big parties, they all still need to be planned. They still need people involved with the implementation, training, support, ensuring they've got the right skills, they've got the confidence to be able to utilize this thing and believe or trust this thing that is being developed in sort of as a proof of concept. So planning's still a really key thing. Outcomes are still a really key thing. I think one of the things I would say actually is important when it's looking at the steps, as I say, is your culture, your ethics. Going back to that policy point, we might not want people to use AI, or we might want people to use AI. Is there certain scenarios? Our proof of concepts have to align with that. Otherwise, it just sets confusion. But yeah, the key thing for me at this point is just ensuring that you've got the right resources, that people are training up and people are learning how to use these solutions that are going to be soon to be implemented or just tested, so that people get exposure, can sort of experiment in the journey. But the idea being it's a journey that has an end, right? You get to an outcome, you can prove the outcome, you can prove it works. Is it going to do what it says it's going to do? No, it's not. Put it on the shelf. It's not a failure. You've learned that that isn't the right thing to go for. So, working with people, really, really important. Ensuring that the team are empowered to use AI where appropriate to use it based on policy. And I think, as I say, having clear, measurable success criteria, being able to say, this is when we know it's done good. And understanding that once you're all successful and it's amazing proof of concept. What if we times it by 10? Is it affordable? Because you're gonna load it up. You've gone from a team of 5 or 20 to a team of 200. Is that going to work? Is it not going to work? Is it realistic? Because again, that can have a massive detrimental effect where you do something and then you have to roll it back as well. So, but I think there's some really good opportunity for businesses to utilize AI. And I think there's some really good opportunities. And it's not to slow you down. It's to say, plan it so that you get some really clear understanding of what you want to achieve, how you want to achieve it. Do we have the standards for it? Have we got the data for it? Are we able to get it consistent? That's going to take time. And understanding that that's the journey you're going on for this given proof of concept, that's going to end before you then make it into something big when you understand it and you've got that feedback and that testing completed, if that makes sense at all.
Makes perfect sense. I really like that point you made around any kind of successful AI project or POC is built with that end point in mind. There is a very logical, very clear end point, and that's what we're working towards and building towards. And it might be that there is another iteration born out of that, or it might be, like you say, that a POC goes into full production and is used across the company. But ultimately, it's building towards that end point, isn't it? And I think if I'm going to break down the points you mentioned there and throughout this, Elliott, into kind of a 3 or 4 last points, it'd be to summarize, kind of define any AI projects or POCs with business teams in mind throughout, so that we make sure we got that buy-in, that consistency. We're not adding confusion or slowing things down or just doing AI for the sake of it, as you rightly mentioned earlier. It's then building with that value in mind and that clear end goal of what do we want this to achieve? Where do we see the benefits of implementing this? And ultimately, how can this shape or drive our organization if successful? And then finally, it's experiment throughout. And on that point around failing fast, if something doesn't work, it's not necessarily a failure, as long as you've learned from that and you've used that to kind of steer and drive your decisions moving forward. And I think if we get those steps right, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that's how organizations can really start to empower their teams through the use of AI.
And I think it's worth just to note as well, I mean, with anything of a proof of concept, there's going to be parts of it that work, or there might be parts that don't work. But you've got a part that works. That's a part of something that could be dramatically supportive of an outcome in itself. So it's sometimes it's even don't try and attack the total of something here. Attack a part of it and work, like you said, iteratively towards it. That's fine too. Each will bring us support and each will bring value if you've defined it and you've quantified it and you've recorded it and you've tested for it.
No, really, really good point. It's all about right sizing the challenge, isn't it? Right sizing the project and taking that into kind of digestible chunks. So, no, definitely, that's been really helpful. So we'll probably wrap up there. Thank you for your time, Elliott. That's been a really good kind of walkthrough. Hopefully, anyone listening has kind of taken some insight or some advice on potentially, if you're looking into an AI project, a POC, proof of value, whatever that may be, some kind of guidance and steps there of how to really kind of build that and make that a success. Naturally, as I mentioned at the start of the podcast, here at Clekt, we are data and AI experts. So if there's any questions or if there's anything that anyone would like to discuss as a kind of result of today's episode, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're always more than happy to discuss these things, and we'd love to hear from you if that is the case. So thank you, Elliott, and I'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, everyone.